Most people in astrology think that their sun sign is the most important sign. It's what we see in horoscopes and in magazines and things like that. So it's just super normalized that your sun sign is what's most important and that there isn't really anything other than that. But that's not really the case at all. What actually feels more accurate a lot of the time is your rising sign, which is also known as your ascendant. Because it's so normalized to only talk about your sun sign, a lot of people forget how important your rising sign, which is also known as your ascendant in astrology, really is. Our rising sign really tells us so much about ourselves. It tells us how our life path and our destiny in this life might unfold because of house placements. It shows us how other people perceive us from the outside in, which is really interesting, and it also can show us even health and bodily function and physical appearance, which is really interesting and very cool to use for spiritual and wellness purposes. So how do you find your rising sign? It's really important that you know the time that you were born exactly because it tells you your rising sign, which lays out the rest of your chart on the natal wheel as you've usually seen. The ascendant is the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact moment that you were born. So basically in this video, I just really want to talk all about the ascendant and the rising as a separate entity of the sun sign. I think a lot of people tend to combine these and oversimplify it, and there's a lot of interesting things about your rising sign. Important concepts are how our rising sign really shapes our life's path, how it acts as a lens for other people to interpret and perceive you, and how your rising sign can tell you so much about your physical health and your body and appearance. I want to talk about how your rising sign shapes your life path and kind of your identity, simply because of how your rising sign sets the pace for the rest of your natal wheel. So your rising sign is the starting point of your first house. It represents your identity, the self, the ego, how you see yourself and how others see you. But because it begins the first house, it lays out the entire rest of your chart, which is super key. And that's why knowing your birth time is so important to astrology and learning astrology, because we don't know the houses if we don't know your rising sign. So there's a huge piece of the puzzle that becomes missing. So just think of your rising sign as like a blueprint for the rest of your chart. That's how vital it is to really getting to know yourself on an astrological level. So for example, if you're a Capricorn rising, which I am, for example, you probably come off as pretty grounded and serious and ambitious because that is the common traits of Capricorn. And because of that, from a Capricorn rising, we'll see Cancer ruling the 7th house. So that will be your descendant sign, actually, or your descendant placement. And then we'll see, for example, Aries will rule the 4th house, and that's because Capricorn starts at the first house, then it goes through Sagittarius, Pisces, back to Aries for that 4th house. So you kind of see how that works to map the rest of your wheel out. So when you really think about it, if you have someone with the same sun and moon, but a different rising, it's going to completely change how they see their traits laid out in their life and the themes of their life, because they could have one sign in the 1st house while you have that sign in the 7th house, which is all about your relationships. So it really depends, and it's really vital to know what your rising sign is, so that way you can better tell a difference and see where those themes are going to show up in your life versus someone else's, even if your charts are really similar. A lot of people think of their rising sign as just how other people perceive you, and while that is true and that's a big part of your ascendant, it also is honestly a lot deeper than that, because it shows how you interact with the world and the energy that you naturally radiate. That being said, your sun sign, and the difference there is that that's kind of like your core being and who you really are deep down. But just because that's who you are doesn't mean that's how you're interacting and showing yourself to the world. So that's where you see that difference come in between the sun and the rising sign. And to build off of that a little bit more, your moon sign, because people normally think of these three in the big three, that shows you more of your inner world and maybe some repressed ideas and emotions that you kind of hide from others. So for example, if we had someone with a Leo sun but a Scorpio rising, at the core, they probably really want to be independent and a leader and kind of loud and proud in the world. But instead, they might come off as more reserved, a little bit quieter, more mysterious, and even a little bit more emotional because they are a Scorpio rising. Or we could think of like a Pisces sun, but a Gemini rising. A Pisces sun at their core is going to be very intuitive and emotional and soft and really care about their environment, while having a Gemini rising might make them come across as less emotional, less inward, and way more chatty and sociable and communicative. So you can really see how it can make a big difference of how you really are and how others perceive you to be. Your rising sign is also so important to know because it tells you what your chart ruler is. A chart ruler in astrology is the planet that rules over your chart. So to find that, we want to look at the planet that is ruling the sign that your first house is in, or what your rising sign, the sign of that is. For example, like I said, I'm a Capricorn rising, so I am ruled by the planet of Saturn. Saturn is my chart ruler because Saturn rules over Capricorn. So for me, really important themes in my life include structure and routine and discipline and motivation, which are all very apparent themes and have always been in my life. Somebody that has Virgo as their rising would be ruled by Mercury. So discussion and talking and being with others and communicating and kind of just being go, 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 like quick Mercury really is going to be really important to them and show up a lot in their lives. So that being said, understanding your rising sign is really important because it shows how you move through the world naturally, and how others see you move through the world and how you interact with the energy of everyday life. Something that I feel like is lesser known in astrology, which is really interesting to me because I think this is like one of the most interesting parts of knowing your rising sign, and that's the fact that your rising sign can tell you a lot about not only one, your appearance, but also two, your physical health and maybe things you might do really well in this life physically, but also things that physically you might struggle with, which is really cool that you can just look at a birth chart and know things like that. Now, we're able to do this because the first house rules over the self, like I said, and it also rules over the physical body in general. So that's why we're able to look at someone's rising sign and know so much about them physically. So what I'm going to do is break it down by the signs' different elements. So starting first with fire signs. Fire signs are going to be usually inclined to be more athletic, very quick, very fast-paced, always moving, that sort of physical build, a lot leaner, things like that. And they might struggle with inflammation or be prone to injuries a lot. Things like that are going to be some of the things they might struggle with more. Earth signs are known to have just very strong and sturdy frames and figures, if that makes sense, but they're also more prone to skeletal issues because, for example, Saturn, which rules Capricorn, rules over the skeletal system in the body. So it's really important for earth sign risings to always be leaning into their body through stretching and slow movement and things like that, because stiffness and soreness and different muscle and bone issues can be really prominent for these signs. Air signs are also known to have leaner frames usually, but they're more prone to struggle with things relating to the nervous system. So insomnia, stress. Water risings are usually more intuitively and emotionally connected to their bodies. You see these types of signs as the ones to be into meditation and yoga and other natural healing movements. However, they may be prone to bloating and water retention and other physical issues like those. In astrology, there actually is a subcategory of astrology called medical astrology. So when astrologists look, one of the first things they look at is the rising sign, because that's so telling of the physical body and how it reacts to things. The rising sign is pretty cool. It tells us a lot about ourselves that we may not have known prior. It lays out our birth chart and kind of shows our life path because of that in certain ways. It's a lens into who we really are and how others perceive us, and it's also such a great tool for knowing our physical health and what our physical bodies might look like. That being said, I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. I really enjoy making astrology content, so I'm excited to make more for you guys. And that's about all for today. You can always book a reading with me on my website, bladeofdesire.com. I will have it linked in my bio. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, bye!